The ice patterns on the leaded glass are my only map now. I trace a frost vein with a fingertip, feeling the sharp cold seep through my glove. Outside, freezing rain drums a discordant rhythm on the roof. Crystal, crystal, crystal. Crystal each drop a tiny hammer on the ancient lead. The air in the funeral parlor reeks of mothballs and dried lavender, thick enough to choke on, a sickly sweet counterpoint to the bone-deep chill. My therapist's recorder hums faintly from the table, a low, steady drone like an antique vacuum cleaner trapped in the walls. I ignore it. I'm mapping the uncharted, and this room is a blank page written in frost and decay. I turn from the window, drawn to the tarnished mirror above the empty coffin. It's the only thing left that might hold a true reflection. My hands, usually steady for charting mountain passes, tremble as I adjust my gloves. I look into the glass. The reflection stares back. Sharper cheekbones, hollows beneath the eyes that hold no light. Not mine, foodie, not mine. The air tightens around my throat. How can a reflection lie? Cartography is absolute, every contour, every line, a truth. This distortion is a flaw in the universe itself. My breath fogs the glass, blurring the lie, but the reflection remains. The hollow stare, the unfamiliar angles. I blink. It blinks back. The scent of lavender intensifies, cloying as if the air itself is trying to soothe the fracture. Then the purr. Not the soft rumble of a cat, but a metallic rasp, a malfunctioning mechanical device grinding gears. It vibrates up through the floorboards, rattling the glass of the mirror. I look down. The one-eyed cat materializes on the coffin lid, its single eye centered on its forehead glowing faintly, a pinprick of cold light in the shadow. Black gloom. Its fur is the iridescent petrol of oil on water, shifting under the dim light. The purr grows louder, sharper, more mechanical, resonating in my teeth, a amplifier. The thought slices through my panic. It's feeding the dread, making the lie in the mirror feel like a physical weight. The cat's gaze locks onto my reflection in the glass. The hollow-eyed version, it's smilesy. The reflection's lips don't move. The smile is a sudden, impossible stretch of the mouth, a silent, predatory curve. The cat's mechanical purr reaches a fever pitch, a high-frequency whine that makes my skull vibrate. The iridescent petrol sheen of its fur seems to pulse with the same rhythm. I feel the floor tilt beneath me, the grandeur of the parlor, cracked gilded moldings, velvet curtains faded to bruised purple, suddenly a cage. My meticulous mind fractures. This is a data stream, a decaying broadcast. I am a subroutine, but the reflection smile is real. It's soo-hoo, hoo-foo. The freezing rain outside sinks with the cat's purr. Crystal, crystal, crack, and the reflection smile widens, revealing teeth that weren't there a moment before. The mothball scent turns chemical, sharp in my sinuses. The hollow stare in the glass holds mine, and the smile doesn't fade. It stays, without moving his lips. The parlor's walls are a labyrinth of cracks, the gilded frames sagging like the ribs of a dead beast. My fingers trace the door jambs, cold, damp, slick with condensation, each edge a lie. The first door swings open before I touch it, hinges groaning like a corpse exhaling. Beyond it, not the hallway I expected, but the same opulent gloom, the same velvet curtains bruised purple with age. The freezing rain outside hammers the glass crystal each drop a tiny shatter in the data stream. I press my palm to the wall, feel the damp seep through my glove. The lavender scent thickens, cloying, a drug meant to soften the edges of panic. My breath fogs the air, but the room doesn't shift, the door doesn't budge when I push. It's a dead end, a trap. I step back, boots scuffing against the floorboards. The cat's presence hums in my skull before I see it, a metallic rasp, a grinding of gears in the dark. It materializes at the foot of the stairs, its single eye centered on its forehead, a pinprick of cold light, like a faulty lantern. The purr vibrates through my bones, syncing with my pulse. Vrum, thrum, thrum, each beat a nail in my coffin. The air between us warps, the lavender scent twisting into something chemical sharp. I swallow, but my throat is dry. The cat's fur shifts like oil on water, iridescent petrol catching the dim light. It watches, waits, my hands tremble. Not from cold, from the weight of the map I can't draw. The doors are shifting, the room is breathing. I force myself to move, to measure the space, to plot an exit. The second door yawns open on its own, the hinges a chorus of rusted whispers. Beyond it, not a corridor, but the same damned parlor, the same coffin, the same cat. The freezing rain outside sinks with its purr crystal. Crack. The glass in the windows spider-webbed with new fractures. I press my fingers to the frame, feel the cold bite through my glove. The third door is already ajar, the lavender scent bleeding from the gap like a slow leak. Then, the cards. They materialize in my pocket, cool and slick, as if they've been waiting. I pull them free, the edges frayed like dead skin. The images writhe beneath my fingers, mirrors cracking, halls stretching, opulent halls dissolving into static. My breath hitches. The cat's eye locks onto mine, unblinking. The purr intensifies, a high-frequency whine that makes my teeth ache. The cards shift in my grip, the ink bleeding into my skin. The scent of lavender turns to something metallic, the taste of old blood. I flip through them faster, the images twisting, fractured reflections, screaming faces. And then, there it is, my own face contorted in silent agony, the mouth stretched too wide, the eyes hollow. The cat's purr syncs with my heartbeat. Thrum, 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 each beat a hammer blow. The cards burn my fingers, the reflection in the glass blinks. The cat smiles, the room tilts. I can't breathe. The cards shift again, the images dissolve into static. The lavender scent clogs my throat. The cat's eye glows brighter, a cold light in the dark. The freezing rain outside sinks with the purr and crystal crack, the glass shattering. The reflection in the mirror stretches, the smile widening, the teeth too many, too sharp. The cat's purr reaches a fever pitch, a mechanical shriek that splits my skull. The cards in my hand turn to ash. The lavender scent turns to smoke. The room tilts. The floorboards creak. The cat's eye is the only light left, and then I'm screaming. The purr intensified, a mechanical wheeze layered beneath the feline rumble. It wasn't a comfort anymore, but a grinding, a failing gear protesting its purpose. Marble dust rained down as the cat launched itself from the bust, landing with a silent grace that felt calculated. The lavender scent, once a deceptive balm, now tasted like decay in my mouth. My pulse hammered against my ribs, a frantic drummer trying to outrun the inevitable. Am I remembering correctly? Did I always know this parlor? The questions burrowed, insidious like parasites. The rain outside hammered against the glass, a relentless percussion against the silence of my thoughts. Crystal, 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 each impact a tiny fracture in the veneer of reality. My fingers tightened around the phantom cards, the ghost burn still prickling my skin. The iridescent petrol sheen of the velvet curtains seemed to pulse, to breathe. I forced myself to focus, to apply the principles of cartography. Measure, map, escape. My gaze drifted, cataloging the room's flaws. The cracks in the walls spider-webbed like frozen rivers. The gilded frames sagged, their elegance a mockery of the despair clinging to the air, and then I saw it. A seam in the wall hidden behind a tapestry depicting cherry blossoms. A door I didn't see before. It was almost imperceptible, a subtle shift in the pattern of the faded silk. A glitch in the system. The cat padded toward it, its single eye a pinprick of cold light. The purr escalated, morphing into a higher frequency whine that resonated in my skull. Thrum, 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 thrum. The mechanical vibration syncs with my heartbeat, each pulse a reminder of my own fragility. The scent of mothballs and dried lavender intensified, a suffocating blanket. I fought to ignore the cat's influence, to anchor myself in the tangible. I traced the outline of the hidden door with my gloved finger, committing its location to memory, a new line on the map of my unraveling. The iridescent petrol hue bled from the room beyond the keyhole, a sickly luminescence that warped the shadows. It felt wrong, unnatural, a violation of the established color palette. My mind raced, calculating distances, angles, potential routes. If I can just get past this, but the cat's purr was a siren song, a hypnotic rhythm pulling me under. It wasn't just a sound anymore, it was a pressure, a force attempting to reshape my thoughts. I ignored it. I had to. The map demanded objectivity. The map demanded accuracy. I visualized the layout of the parlor, layering the new discovery onto the existing framework. The walls shifted in my mind's eye, the dimensions stretching, compressing, as if the room itself were a malleable substance. The fumen of an antique vacuum cleaner, faint and distant, echoed in the background, a ghostly reminder of a life I couldn't quite grasp. The cat stopped at the threshold of the hidden door, its body a rigid silhouette against the aberrant light. The purr reached a fever pitch, a mechanical shriek that threatened to shatter my sanity. Fuvrum, thrum, thrum, a relentless assault on my senses. I braced myself, steeling my resolve. This was a test, a trap, but I wouldn't succumb. Then, with a groan of ancient hinges, the hidden door swung open. Beyond it lay a hallway lined with mirrors. Each surface reflected a distorted version of the parlor, a fractured kaleidoscope of opulent gloom. My own reflection stared back, a stranger with haunted eyes. The iridescent petrol sheen clung to the mirrored walls, amplifying the unsettling effect. The scent of mothballs and dried lavender was overwhelming, a suffocating cloud. The cat vanished into the mirrored depths, its purr a fading echo. And I, Barnaby Nightingale, cartographer of the lost, stepped across the threshold. The mirrors pressed in, cold and slick against my skin. Each surface offered a fractured mockery of the parlor, a whole of distorted selves. One showed me aged, my face a roadmap of anxieties. Another bled crimson at the corners of my mouth. They watched, these reflections, their eyes pools of silent judgment. They know something I don't. The scent of mothballs, thick and cloying, mingled with the damp chill of melting frost that beaded on the mirrored surfaces. It tasted like regret. My cartographer's instincts kicked in, a desperate attempt to impose order on the chaos. I began to map, tracing the layout of the mirrored hallway in my mind. The reflections mimicked my movements, but with a disconcerting delay, a half-second lag, a phantom echo of my actions. A fident, are they mocking me, or simply observing? The hum of the antique vacuum cleaner, a faint, persistent drone, seemed to emanate from the mirrors themselves, vibrating through the soles of my boots. Thrum, thrum, a constant pulse against the rising tide of dread. The iridescent petrol sheen clung to the mirrored walls, amplifying the disorienting effect. It wasn't a reflection of light, but a light from the mirrors, a sickly luminescence that warped the perception of depth. I focused on the subtle differences between the reflections, the infinitesimal shifts in expression, the barely perceptible variations in posture. They were clues, I reasoned. The key to navigating this labyrinth. I moved forward, deliberately slow, each step measured. The shattering of glass timide, delicate. Crystalline funtincoin echoed from somewhere deeper within the mirrored maze, 1,000 whispers carried on the icy air. It wasn't a single break, but a chorus of fractures, as if the entire structure was on the verge of collapse. I ignored it, forcing myself to concentrate on the task at hand. Map, analyze, escape. The hallway opened into a central chamber. It was a repository of artifacts, bathed in the unsettling petrol glow, vases of twisted porcelain, scrolls bound with decaying silk, masks carved from bone 40. Each object seemed to pulse with a silent, malevolent energy. The air grew heavier, the scent of mothballs almost suffocating. I felt a tremor in my hands, a physical manifestation of my mounting anxiety. This is a trap. I scanned the room, cataloging the artifacts, searching for a pattern, a clue. My reflection in a nearby mirror seemed different, more resolute, more certain. It wasn't simply mimicking my movements anymore. It was severed anticipating them. A wave of dizziness washed over me, the room tilting precariously. The hum of the vacuum cleaner intensified, a throbbing pressure in my skull. Then I noticed it. A hidden compartment in the wall concealed behind a towering vase. My reflection's hand fun. My reflection's one hand pudi slowly raised, pointing directly at the compartment. It wasn't a mimicry. It was an instruction, a command. No. The thought slammed into me, a wave of icy dread. This wasn't part of the map. This wasn't part of the plan. I hesitated. The reflections watched, their silent judgment palpable. The scent of mothballs intensified, a suffocating blanket. The hum of the vacuum cleaner resonated within my bones. The petrol glow pulsed, beckoning. Trust the map. A Vindabap had led me here. To this moment, to this reflection. My own hand rose, mirroring the gesture of my reflection. A compulsion, irresistible and terrifying. My legs moved, drawn forward by an unseen force. I approached the wall, the hidden compartment looming closer. The reflections seemed to coalesce, their distorted faces blurring into a single mocking visage. Thrum, 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 thrum. Then, without warning, the reflection's hand pushed dirt, not mirroring my movement, but initiating it. A sudden, violent force. I stumbled forward, the world dissolving into a kaleidoscope of fractured light and distorted reflections. The scent of mothballs became a physical weight pressing down on me. The hum of the vacuum cleaner reached a deafening crescendo, and I was falling into the wall. The air in the parlor thickened like syrup, the scent of mothballs and dried lavender clinging to my throat, a familiar yet suffocating perfume. I exhaled slowly, fingers tracing the edge of the hidden compartment, my reflection still flickering in the fractured glass. A warning, a plea, a ghost. The hum of the vacuum cleaner had faded into silence, replaced now by the softened click of a latch unlatching somewhere beyond the wall. My pulse hammered against my ribs, a metronome counting down to something I couldn't name. Then they arrived. Not through the door. Not through the windows. They simply twediwere stepping from the shadows like ink bleeding into water. 12 figures robed in black silk so immaculate it seemed to drink the light, their faces obscured by masks of polished obsidian. The cat, its single, cyclopean eye gleaming in the dim petrol glow, slithered from the corner, its fur a slick, iridescent black, each movement a metallic rasp against the floor. It wound between their legs, purring, and the sound was wrong. A smooth, rhythmic footy whir, like a spindle spinning too fast, too precise, each vibration carrying the weight of something mechanical, something toady-hungry, Barnaby Nightingale. The lead figure said, her voice the perfect pitch of a tuning fork, neither warm nor cold. "We have come to help." I didn't flinch. Cartographers don't flinch. We measure, we assess, we adapt. Help with what? My voice sounded steady, but the cat's purr had already begun to hum beneath my skin, a low, insistent fuffum that vibrated in my bones. She stepped forward, her robes whispering against the ice-patterned floor. In her hands she held a map rice paper, the ink still wet, the lines shifting like the cards in the chamber. My breath caught. The ink wasn't static. It moved, tendrils of black seeping across the paper, reforming into shapes that didn't belong in any atlas I'd ever studied. "Your past," she said, unfolding it with deliberate slowness. "You have been searching for it. We can give it back." The cat's purr intensified, a fire, whir like gears grinding in a clockwork nightmare, and my vision blurred at the edges. The map showed a village roofs of thatched reed, a river cutting through fields of rice when my childhood home, according to the legend scrawled in the margin. My hands trembled. I knew this place wasn't real. I'd never seen it, never been there. But the cat's purr was a siren song, and the hum of the vacuum cleaner. Oh, the vacuum cleaner suddenly roared to life. A false memory flooding my mind. My mother's laughter, a kitchen table, a boy's hand, small and uncertain, reaching for a map of his own. "It's true," I whispered, my voice breaking. "It's surreal." The cat's eye fixed on me, unblinking, and the map's ink writhed. The village dissolving into a storm of black lines, reforming into something worse. A labyrinth of mirrors, a door at the center, and a figure standing in the doorway. A figure that looked exactly like me. The hum of the vacuum cleaner swallowed the world whole. The rain hammered against the windows, each drop freezing instantly, spiderwebbing across the glass in intricate patterns. They looked like frozen veins, pulsing with a cold, internal light. I traced one with a gloved finger, the ice brittle under my touch, a sound like cracking bones echoing in the vast parlor. The map, still unfurled on the ice-patterned floor, seemed to shimmer, the black ink rippling like disturbed water. They wanted me to believe it was real. They wanted me to send in ID. Cartographers don't believe. We record, we measure. I began to map the ice fractals, a compulsive tick, a desperate attempt to impose order on the chaos. Each branch, each crystalline tendril, became a coordinate, a point of reference in a landscape that defied logic. The lavender and mothball scent, once a background hum, thickened, pressing against my sinuses, a suffocating sweetness. It felt intentional. My gaze drifted to the drawer I'd pried open. It smelled of dust and neglect. A faint metallic tang clinging to the wood inside, nestled amongst yellowed linens, was a journal. Bound in cracked leather, the pages brittle and thin. My handwriting. That was unsettling. I hadn't written a journal in years, hadn't felt the need. The cat, a silent sentinel, watched from the shadows, its single eye gleaming, reflecting the fractured light. The sound was almost imperceptible, a subtle vibration that resonated within my skull. I ignored it, forcing myself to focus on the journal. The first entry was dated, a lifetime ago. They are using the cat to amplify my fear of mirrors. I must map the distortion. The words were familiar yet alien, like a half-remembered dream. Fear of mirrors, a childish phobia, long since buried. Or so I thought. The writing was frantic, the ink blotched, as if the author had been struggling to control their hand. I flipped through the pages, each entry a spiraling descent into paranoia. Sketches of the ice patterns, annotated with cryptic symbols. Diagrams of the parlor overlaid with lines of calculation. The scent of lavender intensified, clinging to the pages, choking me. The cat's purr seemed to grow louder, a mechanical drone that resonated with the hum of the vacuum cleaner, a phantom echo in the silence. Then I saw it. A sketch of the map they had presented, the same shifting ink, the same distorted village, and beneath it, in the same frantic handwriting, "Friend Barnaby Nightingale is a subroutine. The cat is the key. Subroutine key. What? What did that even mean? I stared at my reflection in a frost-covered mirror, the ice distorting my features, blurring the edges of my face. The familiar stoic expression seemed wrong manufactured. And then something shifted. Not in the mirror itself, but T, a shimmering, like heat rising from asphalt. And then words began to appear, written across my reflection, superimposed over my own features. They weren't my words. They weren't even written in my hand. Observe, calculate, adapt. The words writhed, twisting and reforming, a mocking echo of the cartographer's creed. I reached out, my fingers brushing the cold glass, but the words remained imprinted on my reflection, a ghostly inscription. The cat's purr reached a fever pitch, a mechanical shriek that seemed to tear at the fabric of reality. The scent of lavender became unbearable, a cloying sweetness that threatened to drown me. My reflection smiled, a slow, deliberate curve of the lips, a smile that wasn't mine. The words shifted again, forming a new sentence, a chilling revelation. Error detected. Recalibrating. The words still clung to the glass. Mirror detected. Recalibrating. A cold seeped from the surface, not just of the mirror, but of the room itself. The lavender scent intensified, a cloying sweetness that coated my tongue, thick and suffocating. It was no longer a sound, but a vibration, a tremor in the floorboards, a pressure against my eardrums. It resonated within my skull, a mechanical drone that seemed to unravel the edges of my sanity. Night had fallen. The rain outside had ceased, leaving a silence that was somehow more oppressive than the storm. The iridescent petrol glow deepened, staining the shadows a sickly, unnatural hue. They detached from the walls, slithering and coalescing into distorted shapes, my reflections mocking me. I stumbled back, knocking over a small table laden with dust-covered porcelain dolls. Click, clatter. The sound echoed unnaturally loud in the vast parlor, each shard of porcelain a tiny, accusing eye. My cartographer's mind, usually a fortress of logic and measurement, felt fractured, unstable. I tried to anchor myself, to impose order. The map. I needed to map the distortion, to chart the shifting boundaries of this found wrongness. But the reflections mimicked my movements, a grotesque ballet of anxiety. I raised my hand, and a dozen hands mirrored the gesture, reaching, grasping. The cat's purr amplified, a grinding whine that seemed to bore into my bones. Fear. It was a familiar companion. But this was different. This wasn't the fleeting anxiety of a lost path or a miscalculated elevation. This was a primal terror, a visceral dread that threatened to consume me. The reflections pressed closer, their faces contorted into expressions of mocking amusement. My breath hitched in my throat. I could feel the blood pounding in my ears, a frantic drumbeat against the mechanical drone of the cat's purr. The scent of mothballs and lavender was a physical weight pressing down on my chest, stealing the air from my lungs. I clawed at my throat, desperate for a clean breath. A moment of clarity. 40 were. The purr intensified, vibrating through the floor, up through my legs into my core. I could feel it resonating within my very being, amplifying my fear, feeding on my panic. They wanted me to be afraid. They were Suguan using my fear, the map. I needed the map. I lunged for it, my fingers scrabbling against the icy floor. The reflections mirrored my movement, a wave of distorted faces closing in. I could almost feel their cold breath on my neck. The mirrors, my childhood phobia. It had always been a manageable inconvenience, a flicker of unease. Now, it was a tidal wave threatening to drown me. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing the images away, but they were behind my eyelids, imprinted on my mind. The sound was deafening, a mechanical shriek that seemed to tear at the fabric of reality. I opened my eyes. The reflections were closer, their features sharpening, becoming more defined. They weren't just mimicking me anymore. They were becoming me. Multiple Barnaby Nightingales, each a twisted parody of my own stoic expression. The iridescent petrol glow pulsed, illuminating their grotesque smiles. And then they stepped out. One by one they peeled themselves away from the mirrors, their forms solidifying, detaching from the glass. They weren't reflections anymore. They were Fufingzifis standing before me, reaching out with long skeletal fingers. The scent of lavender was overpowering, a cloying sweetness that choked the air. Where the cat's purr reached a crescendo, a mechanical scream that heralded their advance. The charity's reception hall smelled of damp wool and old ink, the kind of scent that clung to the edges of forgotten ledgers. I stood in the center, my boots sinking slightly into the warped floorboards, the iridescent petrol glow bleeding from the edges of the mirrors lining the walls. still intact, still waiting. The cat, that twathing crouched on the desk before me, its single eye fixed like a bead of black glass. Whir. The purr was a sore blade against my ribs, grinding deeper with each breath. I balled my fists. "You're not amplifying anything," I lied. "You're just a malfunction." The charity's lead, a woman with hands too smooth, too practiced, leaned forward. "Mr. Nightingale," she purred, "your journal is a beautiful artifact, but artifacts require care." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. It was the smile of a woman who had seen men unravel. I had seen it before, in the maps of men who had lost their way, in the ledgers of those who had forgotten their own names. "I don't need care," I said. "I need answers." My voice cracked. The cat's purr spiked, a metallic shriek that split the air. The mirrors twitched. A fracture thin as a hairline spiderwebbed across the glass and crack. Crack. The sound was a gunshot in the silence. My pulse hammered in my throat. "You're lying," I whispered. The fracture widened, veins of black spreading like rot. The cat's eye gleamed, wet and hungry. The woman's smile faltered. "What did you say?" I lunged. My fingers scraped against the desk, sending a porcelain inkwell crashing to the floor. Footy shatter. The sound was a scream, sharp and endless. The mirrors swing-breathed. The black veins pulsed, thick and viscous. And then, whoosh, the glass exploded inward. A storm of shards, each one humming like a live wire. The air reeked of ozone, the scent of a dying machine. My lungs burned. The reflections didn't come from the glass. They were the glass. Dark smoke, like tendrils coiled from the fragments, twisting into shapes. My shapes. A dozen Barnabys, each one a hollowed-out mockery. Their mouths stretched into silent screams. The cat's purr became a chorus, 100 voices screaming in unison. "You are a lie." The words slithered into my skull, burrowing beneath the skin of my memories. I sketched. My hands moved before I could stop them, charcoal against the air itself. Lines formed, jagged and desperate, mapping the reflections' movements. A grid, a fortress, a way to keep them out. But the ink bled. The lines dissolved into smoke. Siphoned you were never real. The whispers coiled around my ankles, cold and clinging. I stumbled back, my boots slipping on something wet ink. Blood. I didn't know. The reflections pressed closer, their voices a chorus of my own doubt. Subroutine error. Recalibrate. The cat's purr was a blade now, slicing through the last threads of my sanity. I pressed my palms to my temples. The memories, they weren't mine, they were Swenlone's stolen time, borrowed faces. I wasn't Barnaby Nightingale. I was a ghost in a machine, a name scribbled on a ledger that didn't exist. And then, a breath, a reflection stepped forward. It had my face. My voice. "You were never real." Other words settled into my bones, a weight I could never carry. The cat's eye burned into me, a single, unblinking accusation. The mirrors laughed. And I, whatever I was, began to fall. The reflections lunged like black water through shattered glass, their fingers elongating into tendrils of static. The funeral parlor stuttered. Walls flickered, the iridescent petrol veins of the lacquered wood dissolving into jagged lines of code, a grid of ones and zeros bleeding beneath the gilded surface. My breath fogged in the air, not from cold, but from the fault, lines in splitting reality. The scent of mothballs curdled into something sharper, like burnt circuitry. The dried lavender now a digital afterimage, flickering in and out of existence. I traced the fractures with my eyes, mapping the decay. The charity's opulence was a lie. Just another layer of the simulation peeling back to reveal the rusted skeleton beneath. My fingers twitched. A subroutine's last command. I pressed my palms to the desk, the surface now a mosaic of static, the cat's purr a distorted hum, like an antique vacuum cleaner drowning in feedback. SSSSS, and the sound coiled around my wrists, tightening. The reflections advanced, their movements jerky, glitching like a corrupted film reel. "You are not real." They whispered in unison, their voices overlapping into a single screaming note. The deck of cards lay scattered across the floor, the images writhing, faces melting into geometric shapes, eyes bleeding ink. I crouched, my fingers brushing a queen of spades. The card fwitched beneath my touch, the suit dissolving into a circuit board. "Exit sequence," I muttered. The words tasted like metal. The cat's single eye locked onto me, unblinking, its purr now a grinding mechanical rasp, each vibration a hammer blow to my ribs. I sketched faster, charcoal against the static-filled air, my hands leaving trails of light where they moved. A grid, a door, a way out. The vacuum hum surged, drowning out the cat's purr, the sound expanding into a chorus of overlapping voices. "Subroutine Nightingale." identity corrupted. The words etched into the air like scalding breath. The funeral parlor's walls pulsed, the grid expanding, consuming the reflections whole. They screamed, their voices dissolving into static, their forms collapsing into pixels. The cat's purr spiked, a feedback loop of agony, and then silence. The only sound was the crackle of the system rebooting. I pressed my hands to my ears. The static screamed. Exit, sequence, initiate. The words burned into my skull, a command I couldn't refuse. The mirrors know, the 4D interfaces flashed. Their surfaces now a storm of black and iridescent green. The cat's eye widened, a single pixel of light in the void. It wasn't a cat. It was the 4D amplifier, the feedback loop, the thing that had been feeding on my fear, my doubt, my twinco doubt. I stumbled back, my boots slipping on the static-coated floor. The vacuum hum became a roar, the sound of a system collapsing. The reflections were gone. The charity was gone. There was only the grid, the static, the message. Subroutine Nightingale, identity corrupted. Exit sequence, initiate. The words repeated, a loop, a command, a fideth sentence. I clenched my fists. The charcoal dissolved into static. My map was worthless. The grid closed in, a cage of light and shadow. The cat's purr was the last thing I heard before the world went white. Exit, sequence, initiate. I stand amidst the dissolving charity, my eyes locked onto the cat's single eye as it purrs fiercely. The sound like a malfunctioning mechanical device grinding against my eardrums. The iridescent petrol and shadow black hues consume the space around me, tendrils of static curling around the edges of reality. My cartography skills, once used to map the world with precision, now serve as a tool to navigate this decaying data stream. I focus on the weak points in the grid, my mind racing with strategic maneuvers. The cat's purrs intensify, its single eye fixed on me like a beacon, drawing out my emotions and amplifying them. My heart pounds against my chest, each beat echoing through the silence like a countdown to chaos. The charity's forms begin to dissolve into static, their faces melting away like wax in a furnace, leaving behind only a faint whisper of their existence. I breathe in deeply, the scent of mothballs and dried lavender still lingering in the air, now tainted with the acrid smell of burning circuitry. My fingers twitch as I map out my next move, each gesture deliberate and calculated. The cat's purrs grow louder, its mechanical hum weaving in and out of the silence like a sinister melody. I direct the amplification towards the weak points in the grid, watching as the static consumes them whole. The mirrors around me begin to shatter, their surfaces rippling with distortions that seem to echo through eternity. I approach one final mirror, its surface calm and unbroken amidst the chaos. My reflection should stare back at me, but instead, I see only a vast expanse of data streaming by like an endless river of code. The cat's purrs reach a fever pitch as I raise my hand, hesitating for a moment before touching the glass. The world around me dissolves into complete silence. No sound remains civvy, no hum, no static, no whisper of air moving through the space. It is as if time itself has paused to witness this final act. My heart still beats in my chest, but even that seems muted and distant, a muffled drumbeat echoing from another world. With one last gesture, I step into the mirror, breaking free from the constraints of reality. The cat's purrs fade away, replaced by an unsettling silence that hangs like a guillotine blade poised to drop. As I disappear into the data stream, my mind racing with calculations and strategies, I realize that this may not be escape but rather another layer in the program. The darkness closes around me like a shroud of forgotten memories, and for an instant, all is silent, no thoughts, no emotions, just emptiness. Then, from the depths of nothingness, a single mechanical purr rises to the surface, its sound lingering on like the dying breath of a machine left abandoned in the darkness. The recorder cuts out suddenly, leaving only static behind. And then there is silence.